everybody. It's a fantastic day as we continue our read along of Matthew's Gospel for this Advent. Today we are reading chapter 18, and we have a great guest with us. I'm going to ask him to introduce himself.
I'm Matt Harbison. I'm a youth director from the Diocese of East Tennessee in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I actually work at the Church of the Good Shepherd. We have around 65 students participating and active in our community, and I have been a youth director for 25 years. So in dog years, that's a long time.
Yeah, it is. It is. Let folks know how we know each other.
So Jason and I met, I guess, gosh, that's been about 10 years ago when he moved to Tennessee. And was a priest at one of our local parishes. And we have a group of youth directors that meet, we call them Chatty. It's the Chattanooga Episcopal Youth. And Jason at his parish was the priest / youth director. So he kind of did it all and was always very helpful and very supportive of youth ministry in his church. And I was at his former parish preaching at their stewardship campaign a couple of months ago, and that hasn't changed. Still lots of kids because of his faithfulness and ministry. So still a great place, but that's where we met, and we kind of hit it off fairly quickly. Both of us having been around ministry for so long, you just can't help but know the vocabulary, and I guess there's a bit of camaraderie there, knowing what people experience in everyday life and doing real ministry with people.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, it seems like 10 years ago because it was pre-COVID when we met, but it was actually only 5. We met in 2017. So but yeah,
well, I'm not surprised. COVID is something years. I mean, it just adds so many things.
Yeah, there's PC and AC now, pre-COVID and after COVID.
That's so true. You know, the biggest thing for me, I used to have to tell students to get off their cell phones, and I don't have to do that anymore, because when kids get together, they want to talk. They want to look at each other and they want to talk. They don't want to do Zoom. They don't want to be online. They don't even want to look at their phones and text. They want to talk to each other. And so I appreciate that. But yeah, before COVID, there were just a whole new set of there was just a whole set of challenges that have changed. I mean, they're kind of non-existent now.
Yeah. So, and a whole new set of challenges has been introduced. Speaking of challenges, today we got Matthew 18. So, what happened in this chapter? Can you outline it for us?
Sure. So, first of all, I'll just say I'm a philosophy and religion major from my local college, and I'm certainly not a scholar, but I read the Bible quite often in terms of Bible studies with the students or confirmation classes. So I would like to say that I stay in the Word, if that's a thing. I was raised in the Baptist church, so I'm recovering Baptist. I'm sorry if I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I'm actually very thankful for my Baptist roots, because I read the Bible a lot as a kid. You know, I memorized all those Bible verses and got those stars. Mm-hmm. So I a lot of times I'll experience something with a student, or we'll be in the middle of a project, and these verses just kind of run through my mind. But Matthew chapter 18, you find yourself at some point after reading Matthew, you're like, didn't I just hear this story? I thought this was like 2 chapters ago, and it just keeps going, right? But really, I think if you want to anchor yourself of where you are in the New Testament, this is right after the Transfiguration. So the disciples are kind of figuring out, oh, this is this guy. You know, they're getting a sense of who Jesus is. It's kind of like when you go into the grocery store and you look around in the produce aisle, you can tell real quick in the produce aisle who goes to the grocery store often and who hasn't been there in a month, right? Because the people who go there often, they walk by, they look at the produce and they throw it right in the buggy and they go. They know right where the baggie is. But the people like myself who go like once a month, we're walking around looking for bags. You know, we've got stuff everywhere. And so the disciples kind of find themselves in that place, and they realize who Jesus is. And so the chapter is the chapter directly after the transfiguration, and Jesus really starts to teach. And the disciples, now that they know who Jesus are, of course, they're trying to get in good with the big guy, right? They're trying to, hey, what about me? Hey, who's the best? And so it starts off with this idea of who is great in the kingdom of heaven. And the disciples are asking Jesus, oh, Jesus, who's the best here? You know, who should we try to be like? And I love that Jesus, in this chapter, he kind of outlines all the things he talks about in his ministry, which is be like a child, approach things with faith. And then he just goes on to talk about, yeah, things are going to be tough. You're going to be tempted. You're going to have these things happen to you, and this is how you should deal with it. And then when that happens and you feel like you're lost, here's what I'm going to do when this happens. You know, when you do wander off, here's where I'm going to meet you. And of course, the disciples' answer or questions for that are, well, so when you mess up, you know, like what's the limit? You know, we're always trying to put a label on things, or maybe monetize things, or categorize things. And I love Jesus's answer there, because he picks, I mean, you'll miss it if you don't read over it or look at it, but he says that you should treat them as you treat the tax collector, or I think he says the tax collector or the Gentile. Is that the word he uses?
Yeah. That's verse 17.
Yeah.
If a member refuses, he's talking about people in the church. You know, if they do wrong, what do we do? And it's, you know, you confront them directly, you go with another church member, then you bring them in front of the whole church. And if they still refuse to listen to even the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector.
Yeah.
Which on its surface seems like he's like, okay, that's the limit. But if we look at the way, I think this might be where you're headed. If we look at the way that Jesus treats tax collectors and sinners,
yes,
even if just in Matthew, we just stay in Matthew, then it's like, okay, he healed the centurion's slave, he healed the demoniacs in Gennesaret with the pigs. You know, that's definitely Gentile territory there. You know, and he, you know, he gets accused when he calls Matthew and has the big banquet at Matthew's house. Matthew, who's Jewish but is working for the Romans as a tax collector. He's you know, working with the enemy, right? Colluding with the enemy, and has this big feast. There's lots of tax collectors and sinners there, and Jesus is having a great time, and they're getting in the and so it's like, even when this person, like within your faith community, refuses to respond, you know, refuses to listen to you, then you have to treat them like Jesus does a tax collection and sinner, which is hard, because we also have to, and you know this as a youth leader, we also have to keep people safe. We have to keep people behaving in the community in a way that keeps people safe. And so there's a tension there between acceptance and holiness that we're, you know, always trying to navigate.
Absolutely. And the very next, you know, after he talks about the limits, you know, and that's exactly where I was going. He says Gentile and tax collector, both people whom we know in this chapter or in this book, Jesus deals with them differently than we would expect him to deal with. And I think that's it. I mean, especially these days, I feel like everything's a game of, oh, where do I stand? You know, and I watch my students do that as well. They're figuring things out, and they're kind of navigating this world just like we are. And parents are doing it, and kids are doing it. They're all navigating this new normal, like we talked about earlier. And Jesus gives us kind of an outline of, don't do it the way everybody expects you to. You know, in the very next verse, he says, Peter says, how many times should I forgive? You know, how many times do I have to put up with this? And Jesus says 77 times 7, which is basically, you just keep on, you know. Right. And right before that, he just got finished saying, if you get lost in this temptation, if you get lost here, here's what I'm going to do. You know, back to, if you do this, then this is what I'm going to do. Jesus is going to come and find you. And I think so often you forget that.
is the parable. It's Matthew's version of the parable of the sheep. It's shorter than it is in Luke.
Yep.
But it's the parable of the sheep. The shepherd has 100 sheep and one of them gone astray. Does he not leave the 99 in the mountains and go and search the one that went astray? Well, actually, no. Shepherds wouldn't leave 100 or 99 of their, entire stock, right? 99% of their entire livelihood alone and go search for the one. Even in that, Jesus is saying, I'm going to do a more and beyond what the shepherds of this world do, what the caretakers of this world do, even the people that are leaders. I'm going beyond what even they do. And that, so when we have strife and tension in the congregation and in the community, we do our best to handle it with grace and know that even if we falter, Christ is still going to be seeking us and hoping for us. And that's a powerful, powerful thing.
And then finally, the parable of the unforgiving servant, the person who is forgiven yet doesn't forgive.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the parable of the prodigal son, in that it's the older brother story. It's but I did this, but it turns it on its end again. Once again, Jesus is putting it back in our court to make the decisions, to be his people, really to do the tough things. And that's what we're called to do these days. It's the tough stuff. I think we always were. I had a college professor who taught me the word hegemony and what it means to be part of the great, the majority, what it means to always have these group of ideas that fit the norm. And as I got older and thankfully in my family, and as I experienced diversity and I looked at ways that people understood things, I realized that as a Christian, my responsibility was not to repeat what I understood, because what I understood was going to be different than what maybe my brother right next to me would understand. And so as I grew up, and especially in college, I realized that there were ideas out there that were foreign to me, and it really took it took what this chapter's implying, that I was going to have to read outside the lines. I was going to have to step outside the box, and I was going to have to be who Christ is calling me to be. And that doesn't mean I have all the answers, and that doesn't mean that I stay in line and do all the right things. It just means that I'm willing to forgive, and I'm willing to understand that I can always learn. The minute you say no, I know, I understand, I know everything I need to know. You shut off learning, and there's nothing left. So for me, this chapter was really about coming to terms with who we are as Christians, and understanding that it's always been tough. I hear people say all the time, well, we're in the last days. And they said it in Jesus's time. Everybody's like, well, Jesus is coming back soon. I always laugh when people say that, because my favorite bumper sticker is the one that says Jesus is coming. And then right underneath it says, look busy.
Right.
and so when I'm working with kids, I'm like, my comparison there is, when the teacher walks out of the room, what happens? And all the kids are like, oh yeah, I know what happens. Most of them are part of those shenanigans, but it's easy for us to forget that we're called to be Christians every day. Jesus is watching, and not just Jesus. And maybe this is the bigger sense in it. And as a youth director, it's where my focus is. Our kids are watching. They're watching. They are seeing what we do. They are seeing us forgive or not. They're seeing us love or not. They're seeing us judge or not. And I think deep down, I think we all want to set a good example, right? I've got so many nieces and nephews, it's not funny. And I'm always thinking about setting a bad example. I don't want to be that uncle, and it's a challenge. It's not easy. It's something that I think we have to work at. We have to set good boundaries and good behaviors, and and continue to do those even when it's tough.
Yeah. When I was reading through that parable, I really thought about the nature of the church. We think Matthew's gospel was written somewhere between 80 and 100 AD, and it probably came out of a community. Like, this was a community's remembrance of Jesus, probably, a congregation in Syria, modern day Syria, right? And so there's a lot in here that's really about how a community of faith is to be run, and what leadership in the faith is, and leadership within a faith community is supposed to be in the whole book. And it's been great to read this and remember and be challenged as a faith leader to that really high standard of grace, that really high standard of grace and leading with grace. And I think this parable at the end is about that. Like, the church, I think every Christian denomination, even the Episcopal Church, we're great at opening the gate until we're in, and then we shut the gate behind us, right? Yeah. That's an extremely human thing. Okay, I'm good. Me and mine are good. And they and them, they're going to need to be on their own business, right? And that's contrary to the Christ of to Jesus in the Gospels, and the risen Christ in the Acts. It's when you draw a line in the sand, more than likely than not, you're going to find Jesus on the other side.
Yeah.
And I think that's what that parable, kind of hints at. Yeah, Jesus is opening up God's grace and forgiveness and just throwing it out there, and you've received it. Now, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah. And
it's go and do likewise, not go and do, oh, hey, I got mine, so now I get to exact revenge. It's not that. It's the opposite of that. And so that's kind of contrary to human nature. It's something that
totally
that we have to work at and practice, and be called to account on, and repent. And then the church helps us with that. Our church, we're in Advent right now. We got Lent coming up in half a moment, and these seasons of the church here, when we intentionally go talk about repentance and talk about self-examination and talk about turning back to the way of God, I think are very, very helpful things that the church provides us to do this. So listen, brother, man, this was great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us, Matt Harbison, live from not outer space, just Lookout Mountain, which is closer to space than the rest of us. But
thank you for having me,
man. It's good to catch up a bit. And folks, I hope you will hit that like and that subscribe button, hit that bell so you're notified to catch any of our videos here coming from St. Patrick's. If you'd like to support this channel or any of the ministries at St. Patrick's, or all of the ministries at St. Patrick's, go to pats-dublin.org/give and make a contribution today. We greatly appreciate that. Keep reading, y'all, and remember, God loves you more than you can ever imagine.